For months, she treated his driveway like her personal parking space, until he called the tow truck twice. What followed was a public downfall so messy the whole neighborhood couldn't stop watching. Malcolm Turner was a man of quiet patience. He needed to be. Spending his weekdays as a middle school science teacher in Clearwater, Florida, meant mastering the art of staying calm while trying to make atoms and ecosystems exciting for kids more interested in TikTok than textbooks. His life ran on routine, a rhythm he cherished. His little brick house, with its neatly edged lawn and narrow single-car driveway, was his retreat. It wasn't flashy, but it was his space. A place to grade papers, sip coffee, and catch the game in peace. That peace lasted until Vanessa Whitmore decided his driveway belonged to her. At first, it seemed like a harmless mistake. Malcolm came home one Friday to find her silver Audi Q5 parked there. Figuring she probably had visitors and needed extra room, he shrugged it off. But then, it happened again. And again. Each time, Vanessa had an excuse. Just dropping something off, just stepping inside for a second, just waiting for a delivery. She'd wave him off with a stiff smile and a flick of her perfectly manicured hand, like she was doing him a favor by even acknowledging him. Malcolm let it slide more times than he should have. Confrontation wasn't really his thing. But one Thursday afternoon, after a long, exhausting day of wrangling 8th graders and grading late assignments, he pulled into his street ready to relax, only to find her Audi blocking his driveway again. This time, there wasn't even anyone visible in her yard or at the door. Malcolm sat in his car for a few seconds, breathing deep, clenching and unclenching his fists on the steering wheel. Then slowly, he got out and walked next door. He knocked, waited, then knocked again, firmer this time. Vanessa opened the door, wearing an expression that practically screamed, "What now?" "Malcolm, is there a problem?" she asked, her voice drenched in fake concern. Malcolm kept his tone even, though his jaw tightened. "Your car's in my driveway. Again." Vanessa blinked like the idea had just occurred to her. "Oh, that? I just had a package coming, and the delivery guy needed space to turn around." She smiled like that settled the matter. "You don't mind, right?" "Actually, I do," Malcolm replied. "I've asked you before. Please stop parking there." Vanessa let out an exaggerated sigh, crossing her arms. "Malcolm? Seriously? We're neighbors. It's not like I'm blocking a stranger's driveway." "You're blocking mine," he said firmly. Vanessa rolled her eyes with dramatic flair. "Are you really making this a thing? Over a few minutes?" Malcolm didn't answer right away, but inside, he'd already decided. The next time she did it, there wouldn't be a knock, there would be a tow truck. Malcolm crossed his arms, his patience officially gone. "And I need it to stop." Vanessa let out a sarcastic laugh. Okay, no need to get so dramatic. I'll move it." She did, this time. But it didn't last. Over the next few weeks, the same routine played out like clockwork. Malcolm would pull up after work, tired and ready to unwind, only to find her silver Audi right where it didn't belong. If he left a note, it vanished. If he knocked, she was suddenly not home. One evening, after grading late at school, Malcolm arrived to find not just her Audi parked across his driveway, but also a shiny black BMW he didn't recognize. That was it. Malcolm parked his car on the street, pulled out his phone, and snapped a photo for proof. Then he marched next door, knocking harder than usual. Vanessa answered the door with the kind of slow, annoyed energy of someone being disturbed during a spa day. "Malcolm," she said, dragging out his name like he was a telemarketer calling during dinner. "Whose car is that?" He pointed directly at the BMW clogging his driveway. "Oh, that's my friend's," she said with fake cheer. "We're having a little get-together. You weren't home, so figured it wouldn't matter." "It matters," Malcolm said sharply, the strain in his voice undeniable. "This isn't a public lot, Vanessa. This is my home." Vanessa crossed her arms, tilting her head like she was the one being inconvenienced. "Well, if you'd said something earlier, I would have moved it." Malcolm's jaw tightened as he inhaled slowly. "I'm saying something now. Move it." She rolled her eyes but finally ducked inside to supposedly make the call. Malcolm stood on her porch waiting. 5 minutes. 15. At 20 minutes, he was done. Without another word, he walked back to his house, sat on his couch, and started looking up the number for a towing service. And that was just the start. Malcolm wasn't a man who liked conflict. He was the type to mind his own business, give people the benefit of the doubt, and avoid neighborhood drama. But Vanessa Whitmore had officially crossed the line. The next morning, before leaving for school, Malcolm picked up the phone and called the HOA. He didn't expect much. HOAs were notorious for siding with whoever had the most connections. And Vanessa? She practically ran the board. But he figured it was worth the call. The response was exactly what he predicted. "Sir, unless there's visible property damage, we typically don't intervene in neighbor parking disputes," the woman on the other end said in a clipped tone. "Have you tried talking with her?" Malcolm sighed, rubbing his forehead. "That's all I've been doing." "Well, we can send a courtesy email, but that's about it." "A courtesy email? Sure," he muttered. "That'll fix everything." But Malcolm wasn't wasting any more breath. Next time, he'd let the tow truck do the talking. Malcolm thanked the HOA rep and ended the call. If they weren't going to handle it. Before leaving for work that morning, he left one final, unmistakable note on Vanessa's windshield. Bold black marker on bright paper. "Do not park here again." But when he pulled up that evening, the note was gone. And her silver Audi was back in the middle of his driveway, parked so carelessly, it was angled across the entire space, like she didn't have a care in the world. Malcolm sat in his car for a second, staring, jaw tight, hands gripping the steering wheel. She wasn't even trying to hide the disrespect anymore. Still fuming, he walked up to her door and knocked, harder this time. It took her a full minute to answer. She opened the door with a half-drunk glass of red wine in hand, her expression lazy and amused, like she'd just been enjoying a spa day. "Malcolm," she drawled, as though his name was a mild inconvenience. "I need you to move your car," he said, keeping his tone even. Vanessa took a long, slow sip before responding. "Oh yeah, about that. Meant to text you, but I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. You always park on the street anyway, right?" Malcolm's jaw flexed, but he kept his voice steady. "It is a big deal. This is my property, Vanessa." Her laugh was short and sharp. "Malcolm, seriously. You're getting this worked up over a driveway?" He stepped a little closer. "I'm getting worked up because I've asked you repeatedly to stop, and you keep acting like it doesn't matter." She gave a dismissive shrug, swirling her wine like this was all beneath her. "I'll move it." Malcolm exhaled, willing himself to let it go. Again. He turned to head back to his house when he heard her mutter something under her breath. The words weren't clear, but the tone. The tone was pure mockery. He froze mid-step. "What did you just say?" Vanessa blinked at him with mock innocence. "No, you said something." She gave a slow smirk. "I just don't get why certain people get so uptight over the smallest things." And there it was. That smug, entitled attitude she always wore like perfume. Malcolm didn't bother saying another word. He went inside, pulled out his phone, and saved the local tow company's number. That night, while grading science quizzes at his dining room table, his mind kept replaying their exchange. The way she dismissed him, the arrogance, the way she acted like she owned the entire street. She wasn't going to stop. And Malcolm? He was done playing nice. The very next time she parked in his driveway, he didn't knock. He didn't leave a note. He didn't text or call. He just picked up his phone and called the tow company. It was a Friday evening, and after another exhausting week corralling middle schoolers through lab safety rules and pop quizzes, he pulled up to see her Audi sitting bold as ever in his driveway like it belonged there. This time he didn't hesitate. He parked down the block, dialed the tow company, and said just 6 words. "I need this car gone now." The driver showed up in less than 20 minutes. It was almost satisfying how smooth the process was. The guy hopped out of the truck, took one look at the situation, and gave a knowing nod. "She's blocking your driveway?" Malcolm confirmed. "Proof of ownership?" Malcolm handed over a copy of his property deed. He'd come ready. "All right then," the driver said with zero hesitation. "Let's get her hooked up." Within minutes, Vanessa's silver Audi was hoisted onto the tow truck, the wheels secured tightly, and the driver wasted no time pulling away from the curb, her car disappearing down the block. Malcolm stood there on his lawn with his arms crossed, watching with a quiet satisfaction. He wasn't sure exactly what kind of storm was about to roll in, but he knew it was coming. Would she bang on his door? Call the police? Try to play the innocent victim? He didn't have to wait long for an answer. Less than an hour later, just as he was settling into his recliner with a cold drink and a stack of ungraded science projects, there came a furious pounding on his front door. Malcolm didn't rush. He took a slow sip, stretched like he had all the time in the world, and finally got up. When he opened the door, there she stood, Vanessa, in fuzzy slippers and silk pajama pants, her perfectly styled blonde bob slightly frizzed, phone clutched tight in her hand, fury written all over her face. "Where is my car?" she snapped. Malcolm tilted his head, feigning confusion. "Oh, you mean the one illegally parked in my driveway?" Her eyes went wide with disbelief. "Don't play dumb with me, Malcolm. Is my car?" He shrugged, completely unbothered. "Towed." She blinked, like the words hadn't registered at first. "You did what?" "You heard me," Malcolm said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "You wouldn't stop parking where you weren't supposed to, so I had it towed. Simple solution to a simple problem." Vanessa let out an incredulous laugh, the kind that had way more drama than actual humor. "Oh, you are going to regret this. Do you even know who I am? I'm on the HOA board. I know people, Malcolm." He gave her a slow, unimpressed blink. "Good for you. Your car's at Greenfield Towing off Maple Avenue. Have a great evening." And with that, he closed the door in her face. But Vanessa wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She stayed on his porch for a solid 10 minutes, shouting, pacing, calling someone on speakerphone while making not-so-subtle threats. Eventually, she called the police. When the officers showed up, Malcolm kept his cool. One officer knocked politely and asked, "Did you have her car towed from your property?" Malcolm nodded, handing over a copy of his property deed. The officer gave it a quick glance, then turned back to Vanessa with zero sympathy. "He's fully within his rights. If you want your car back, you'll need to contact the tow yard and pay the release fee." The way Vanessa's face turned 10 shades of red almost made Malcolm laugh right there on the spot, but something told him this saga wasn't over. And he was right. If anything, Vanessa escalated. Within days, small acts of petty revenge started trickling in. She taped a passive-aggressive note to his door, written in neon pink Sharpie like she thought she was filing some sort of official complaint. "This is a community. Consider your neighbors next time." Malcolm crumpled it and tossed it without a second thought. Then came the HOA letters. Suddenly, the same potted succulents that had sat on his front steps for the past 3 years were labeled as a violation of community aesthetic standards. Malcolm actually laughed out loud reading that one. Then came another notice. This time, it was about his trash cans being left out too long. And then another. Apparently his mailbox paint was faded and unsightly. By the time Malcolm received the 4th letter from the HOA, he wasn't even angry anymore. He was almost impressed. Vanessa was putting in more effort to harass him than most people put into their full-time jobs. But the real turning point came when she started calling security on him. One evening, while Malcolm was simply watering his front lawn, a white security SUV pulled up to the curb with its amber lights flashing like he was some kind of threat. A tall, middle-aged officer stepped out, adjusting his utility belt like he was about to make an arrest. "Do you live here?" the officer asked, glancing at a clipboard. Malcolm frowned. "Of course I do." The officer cleared his throat awkwardly. "We got a call about suspicious activity." Malcolm exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Suspicious. That word again. He turned toward Vanessa's house and, sure enough, there she was, standing on her porch, arms crossed over her chest, wearing that same smug, fake-concerned expression like she hadn't just called in a bogus report. Malcolm gave the officer a dry, unimpressed look. "Let me guess. She didn't like how I was holding the hose?" The officer's face flushed. "Look, sir, Save it," Malcolm cut him off. "I already know exactly who called. Tell her to find a new hobby." The officer sighed, gave an awkward nod, and walked back to his vehicle. Meanwhile, Vanessa just stood there smiling, like she had scored some kind of victory. But Malcolm wasn't playing that game anymore. He walked straight across the lawn, up to her front steps, and knocked sharply on her door. She opened it, feigning wide-eyed innocence. "Oh, everything all right, Malcolm? I saw security out front. Hope nothing serious happened." Malcolm folded his arms, staring at her. "You know exactly why they were here." Vanessa gasped in mock offense. "Malcolm, that's no way to speak to a neighbor. I was just being cautious. We all have to look out for each other, right?" He studied her for a long second. She wanted him to snap, to yell, to give her ammunition. But he wouldn't. Instead, he gave her a slow, calculated smirk. Calm, steady, unbothered. "I'm done playing with you, Vanessa." His voice was low, controlled, almost amused. "I gave you more chances than you deserve. But you keep pushing. So let's see what happens when I start pushing back." For the first time, she hesitated. Her expression flickered, just for a second, but Malcolm caught it. And she should have been worried, because the next time she parked in his driveway, he wasn't just going to have her car towed. He was going to make sure the consequences hit where it hurt most. Vanessa had no idea what was coming. And Malcolm didn't have to wait long. Exactly 1 week later, on a bright Saturday afternoon, he came home from a great morning workout, turned onto his street whistling to himself and froze. There it was again, Vanessa's silver Audi parked dead center in his driveway. Not just parked, blocking access to his garage. It was bold. It was disrespectful. And worst of all, his entire family was due to arrive in an hour for a barbecue. Malcolm sat there in his car for a moment, staring at the scene like he couldn't believe the audacity. Then he calmly shifted into park, stepped out, pulled out his phone, and made the call. "This is Malcolm Reed," his tone cool and measured. "I need a vehicle removed. Same address as before." The dispatcher chuckled on the other end. "Let me guess. Same car?" "You got it," Malcolm replied. "We'll be there in about 15, the dispatcher promised. Malcolm smiled, grabbed a couple of folding chairs from his trunk, and planted himself on his porch like he was settling in for a front-row seat at a show. Arms crossed, legs stretched, he waited. Right on time, the tow truck rounded the corner and pulled up to the curb with purpose. The driver hopped out, adjusting his gloves with the kind of efficiency that only came from doing this more times than he could count. "Back again?" the driver joked, eyeing the familiar silver Audi. "Looks like it," Malcolm said, pointing at the car like it was a piece of trash that needed to be taken out. Without wasting a second, the driver got to work. The metal hooks clanked, the hydraulic lift whirred, and within moments the Audi's front wheels were off the ground. That's when Vanessa came tearing out of her house, yelling like her house was on fire. "What are you doing?" she screeched, her sandals slapping hard against the concrete. Malcolm didn't move. He stayed right where he was, sipping from his water bottle, looking every bit like a man enjoying the afternoon breeze. The tow truck driver didn't even glance her way. He kept working, locking down the tires. Vanessa stormed across the lawn toward Malcolm, her cheeks flushed with fury. "Are you serious right now? You called them again?" Malcolm raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "You parked in my driveway." "Again." Her fists balled at her sides. "I have people over. There's no street parking left." "Not my problem," Malcolm said simply, not even bothering to stand. Vanessa let out a short, sharp laugh, the kind that held no humor. "You're being petty. I would have moved it." Malcolm tilted his head like he was explaining something to a particularly slow student. "See, Vanessa, you've said that before, more than once, and yet, here we are." Her face turned a blotchy red. "You really don't get it, do you?" she hissed, stepping closer. "I have pull in this neighborhood. I sit on the HOA board. I can make life here very difficult for you." Malcolm actually laughed at that, a full, rich, from-the-chest laugh. "Oh, Vanessa." He stood up slowly, dusting imaginary lint from his jeans. "I don't think you understand what's happening right now." He nodded toward the street. "Your car? It's already gone." Vanessa spun around in time to see the tow truck disappearing down the road, her Audi bouncing slightly on the lift. She let out a scream so loud a few neighbors peeked out their windows. "You'll regret this," she yelled after him. Malcolm didn't flinch. "No, Vanessa. You will." With that, he turned and headed back inside, just as his family started pulling into the street for their cookout. Laughter, hugs, and the smell of barbecue filled the air while Vanessa stood alone on her porch, fuming. But of course, she wasn't done. Malcolm knew that much. The second tow should have ended it. But Vanessa Vanderholt wasn't built to accept a loss quietly. Her next move? A full-blown neighborhood spectacle. By Monday morning, Malcolm woke up to find himself painted as the neighborhood villain. Blythe's fingerprints were all over it. The HOA board, her little circle of friends, had sent out a carefully worded email to the entire community. The message was dripping with passive-aggressive concern. It's disheartening when neighborly disputes escalate unnecessarily. We encourage all residents to seek peaceful dialogue rather than drastic actions. Subtle, but just sharp enough to make Malcolm look like the bad guy. And then came the flyers. Yes. Actual printed, laminated flyers taped to every mailbox on the street. In bold letters, "Is this the community we want? Towing neighbors instead of talking?" Malcolm stood at his curb, yanked the one off his mailbox, and laughed out loud. She really went and made this about a driveway. But the best part? Nobody was falling for it anymore. Vanessa had pushed her luck way too far. The morning after her latest stunt, Malcolm's phone lit up with messages. Neighbors, co-workers from the school, even a couple of HOA board members who weren't part of her little clique. "Hey man, saw that flyer? What's her problem? We all know she's been a nightmare for years. She tried to fine me $250 last summer for having a garden gnome. If she parks in your driveway again, I'll split the tow bill with you." Malcolm actually laughed at that one. The best part? He didn't even have to defend himself. People had seen Vanessa's nonsense firsthand for years. The petty fines, the constant complaints, the fake concern wrapped in HOA letterhead. And now that she was making a public fool of herself, the neighborhood was turning against her. Then came the HOA meeting. Normally, Malcolm wouldn't have wasted a single evening sitting through one of those. But this time, he grabbed a front-row seat and made sure Vanessa could see him walk in. Arms crossed, leaning back in his chair, relaxed. She didn't look at him once. The meeting dragged through the usual garbage, budget adjustments, community landscaping, another boring reminder about recycling schedules. But then, one of the board members cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Before we wrap, we need to address a recent complaint regarding inappropriate use of private property and HOA resources." Malcolm smiled, already knowing where this was going. Vanessa sat up straighter, probably rehearsing her victim speech in her head. But then, the complaint is against Vanessa Vanderholt. Malcolm didn't even bother hiding the grin that spread across his face. Vanessa's head jerked toward the board like she'd misheard. "Excuse me," she blurted. A few board members shifted in their seats awkwardly. One of them, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair, sighed. "Vanessa, we've received multiple reports from residents about harassment, misuse of HOA channels, and retaliatory behavior toward neighbors." Vanessa's mouth fell open. "That's ridiculous. I'm the one being harassed." But the board member kept going. "We've reviewed several incidents, unnecessary security calls, unauthorized HOA-wide emails, even distributing flyers without board approval." Vanessa turned in her seat, scanning the room for support, but none came. Her closest allies on the board. At first, Malcolm gave her the benefit of the doubt. The first time her silver Lexus RX showed up in his driveway, he assumed she had visitors and ran out of space. Fine. No big deal. But then it happened again. And again. Every time Vanessa had an excuse. "Oh, I was just running inside for a second," she'd say with a fake laugh, waving her perfectly manicured hand like she was brushing off dust. Malcolm let it go. Until the day he pulled up after a brutal day at work and found her SUV parked square in his driveway again, with zero sign of her anywhere. Malcolm knocked on her door, keeping his voice level. Vanessa answered wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a glass of wine, her tone dripping with fake surprise. "Malcolm, what's the problem?" she asked like he was being dramatic for no reason. He pointed to his driveway. "Your car's in my spot again." She blinked like the thought had never occurred to her. "Oh, I had a delivery earlier. They needed space to turn around. It's no big deal, right?" Malcolm took a breath. It is. I need you to stop parking there. Vanessa sighed dramatically. We're neighbors, Malcolm. Don't be so uptight. But she didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, it became routine. Malcolm would get home only to find her Lexus there again. Notes left on her windshield disappeared. Knocks on her door were ignored. Then one night, Malcolm pulled in to find not just her SUV, but also a shiny black Audi parked in his driveway. That was it. He took photos, called a towing company, and watched both cars get hauled off within the hour. Vanessa's reaction was instant and nuclear. She pounded on his door so hard the windows rattled. When Malcolm opened it, she was fuming, wearing slippers and silk pajama pants, waving her phone like she was about to call the FBI. "Where's my car?" she screeched. Malcolm stayed calm. "At a tow yard. You'll need to pay the release fee." Her face turned a shade of red he didn't know was humanly possible. "I'm on the HOA board. You'll regret this." Malcolm gave her a slow blink. Good luck with that. And of course, she didn't let it go. Next came the passive-aggressive notes taped to his door, then the HOA violation letters. "Your mailbox paint is faded. Your front bushes are 2 inches over height. Your trash bins were visible from the street for more than 4 hours." The pettiness was Olympic level. But Malcolm didn't flinch. He started documenting everything, every note, every false complaint. Every time she called security to report suspicious activity when he was just watering his lawn. Then came her final act of desperation: stealing his trash cans. One afternoon, Malcolm noticed they were missing. He walked around the block, and there they were, stacked neatly behind Vanessa's fence like some weird, passive-aggressive trophy. Malcolm snapped photos from multiple angles, printed them, and taped one to her door with a single note. Returning these by sundown would be a very smart idea. She didn't. So the next morning, Malcolm filed an official complaint with the HOA, attaching the photos along with a detailed list of every harassment incident. This time the board couldn't ignore him. Her pattern of behavior was too obvious. Within the week, Vanessa Whitmore was voted off the HOA board in a unanimous decision. And from that day forward, she never parked in his driveway again. She never called security on him again. She never left another note, sent another letter, or uttered another passive-aggressive insult. In fact, she didn't speak to Malcolm at all. Not a word. She kept her head down and avoided him completely. And honestly, that was the most peaceful outcome Malcolm could have asked for. The neighborhood had watched it all unfold. Vanessa's reputation went from HOA queen to neighborhood punchline. Stories about her started surfacing like wildfire. "She fined me $80 for hanging a wind chime. She once called the HOA because my nephew was playing basketball in the driveway. She threatened to sue me over Halloween decorations." Turns out she'd been making enemies for years. Malcolm was just the first person to push back hard enough to make it stick. But karma wasn't done with her. 2 months later, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn. Rumor had it she couldn't take the embarrassment anymore. Others whispered that with so many neighbors now speaking up, staying wasn't an option. Malcolm didn't care why she left. The day the moving trucks pulled away, he sat on his porch with a cold drink in hand, smiled at the sunset, and enjoyed the sight of his empty driveway. Finally, his again. The lesson: some people get so used to bullying others that they forget what happens when someone finally fights back. They think they're untouchable until the day they're not. And when they fall, the whole neighborhood watches. If you like this story, hit that subscribe button. There's plenty more where that came from.